Organizational psychologist Adam Grant has recently pointed out a meta-analysis of 63 studies that show that women who assert their ideas, make direct requests, advocate for themselves, they're liked less. And more importantly, they're actually less likely to be hired. I find this surprising. These are sort of the attributes that I'm interested in. You know, people with ideas, assertiveness, those who speak up, those who advocate for themselves or their project or their passion. These are the people I want to hire. This is contrasted against men who are the strong, silent, stoic types. If that's so, wouldn't women be conversely more likely to be more verbose, more engaging, maybe even more malleable? For the last 30 years, I've been in a number of positions where I've been in charge, the person who often does the hiring and sets the direction for the groups, organizations, institutions I run. The fact is that over this period, I've hired way more women than men. I try to do some accounting, but it's sort of like, 90% women versus about 10% men. This includes hiring for both the practice, and that includes rheumatologists and nurses and support staff. Also includes study coordinators and those who work on me with clinical trials, those who worked with me in medical education, more recently in digital publishing. I really believe that by hiring more women, my enterprises have really benefited. So why have I hired more women? I thought about this for a number of weeks, carried around a piece of paper and jotted notes down. And I've surmised that the reason I hired more women than men is sort of threefold. One, that's what my mentors were doing, and I learned from my mentors who were not afraid to hire women. Second, I have a strong desire to mentor young people and mentor them not just to be good in their job, but to lead them to greatness. I think we all have that in us. And lastly, I basically over time evolved into an intentional gender inequity strategy or gender equity strategy that's driven really for a cultural change where I work and where I lead. The best way you can change a diversity equity issue, I think, is through institutional change. What better way to change institutional change is by changing the culture where you work. The problem is that this requires you to know what the problem is, to have a forward-thinking strategy, and to commit to cultural change, which is almost by definition a slow transformational process. So as a leader of either my practice, my institution, the organization I'm leading, I have the ability to make conscious changes about the culture that I'm going to work in and lead. I started out in academic rheumatology after 12 years at the university. I left to pursue a number of different goals and paths, but really primary amongst them was to create a culture that I wanted to work in, that I'd be proud to work in, and more importantly, that I'd be proud to lead. While we all want to choose the best person, the right person for the job, hiring decisions also requires you to consider the intangibles, those things that are not measured, not always on the application, but basically the attributes that lead to a better work milieu. I think, building a team is all about the culture and the milieu. So I'm fortunate in that I've done thousands of interviews. I've done a lot of interviewing for medical schools. I've done a lot of interviewing for jobs. I think I'm kind of good at it, trying to get to the core of what's not on paper. And I think that men and women are really the same as applicants. There's always some who are driven more than others by either the need for money, to be a star, to have independence, etc. But there are a few things, and the thing that stands out for me, and I think this goes to culture, is that when I interview men, I think men want the job as much as anyone, and they really want to be sure that they let me know that they're the best candidate for the job. And that sometimes on paper, that's sometimes what they say. On the other hand, when I talk to women applicants, I get the impression that they're more discerning about how they're going to fit in that job. Meaning these are their thoughts. They're worried about how they fit, how they're going to integrate. They're concerned about how they're going to work in this workplace, maybe more so than I'm actually concerned about those factors. But that's actually important, and I think it's one of the reasons why I've hired so many women, because I think since I started making these decisions, I'm really proud of the workplaces that I've created and the people I work with. When I see patients as a physician, my mantra is provide hope, goals, and rules. When leading a business, if I have a similar mantra, it's smarter choices, advance the culture, and focus on the challenges. I think that, again, the culture, the immediate challenges, this is why hiring is so important. I've written blogs about the nurses I work with being the glue, both for me personally, for the other coworkers, and for the clinic as a whole, and that without those glue-like nurses, my days and list of tasks would be a never-ending mess and would really not have the same end. And that's why I wrote the blog about choosing the right people to be the glue in your practice. While hiring, women in roles for nursing or clerical duties, that's not a surprise. Most of us do that because that's who the workforce really is. But does that extend beyond that to your research staff, to your coworkers, to other physicians that you work with? I mean, again, these decisions are going to be the people that you not only work with, but the people that you depend on. So what am I looking for in those positions as well? I think it boils down to a few traits that I really want to see in the applicants and the people I'm going to work with and depend on and need. That includes accuracy, dependability, productivity, and lastly, playing well in the sandbox. There's research on institutional dynamics that show that women are significantly and statistically more loyal to the companies and institutions that they work for, more so than men. This downstream equates to greater dedication to task, longer employment periods, augmented productivity, and greater morale. In a male-dominant work environment, hiring women obviously promotes diversity, and yet there are many, many studies that show that diverse work teams give you the same outcomes, meaning that they solve problems more quickly, they make decisions more efficiently, there's better workflow, there's better performance, and by fostering that diversity, you foster competitiveness, which is that also leads to an improvement in productivity. Diversity in the workplace leads to more satisfied customers, greater sales revenues, higher profits, shown in many different studies. This applies to the B workers in the trenches, but also applies at the upper echelon jobs, the executives, the leadership, board members, etc. So I want the people I work with to be engaging, to be creative, to be empathetic, and find the best solutions possible. This applies to a lot of the things that they'll face: difficult patients, difficult tasks, difficult research. I think by fostering those attributes amongst your workers, you're going to create an environment that leads to better satisfaction, but actually I think leads to more leaders than followers. So the statistics on the disadvantage that women face in the workplace is sort of, tremendous. And to not identify or understand how they're disadvantaged with regard to salary, hiring, opportunities, and leadership is really to have your head in the sand. It's a hard glass ceiling that women are struggling to get through, and I'm trying to do what I can, I think, to make sure that I can help change the culture and promote them as they need to be. So there really is no reason, I think, for them to be held back in career advancement. If you read a lot about this, you find that women basically say when it comes to the workplace or positions on boards or committees, they have a lot of gripes. And they're snubbed. They say that their views and their ideas are not taken seriously. They say they're relegated to worker roles and are not offered leadership positions. They have to work harder to overcome barriers that they have to face that maybe other employees don't have to face. And lastly, there's not enough mentoring. Well, when I see these things, I'm thinking exactly the person I want to hire. By being concerned about these snubs, have they not already paved the path to a career that's built for success? And all I need to do is provide the opportunity. There was a recent dinner that was held in my honor. It was attended by a bunch of friends and a lot of coworkers from the past and my current coworkers. What stood out in my mind about that event was that there were two separate women, one a researcher, another a rheumatologist, who privately thanked me for considering them and hiring them, noting that they were not given the same opportunity or same equality, if you will, when interviewing elsewhere. Clearly, how I treated them in the hiring process meant a lot to them, more than I actually realized. And I'm glad that it was sort of not as intentional as it probably should have been, but it really is who I want to be. Mind you, these people were excellent candidates, clearly the best, yet their career options were constrained because that they were women and that they could have children in the future. So the 800-pound gorilla in the room is that hiring a woman of childbearing age means that they won't produce the same productivity and the same number of FTE, full-time employment hours, as a male candidate. This translates to discussions when it comes to hiring. Or what the heck are we going to do when that gal becomes pregnant and is out of the office for 6 to 12 weeks? Let's go with the man rather than the woman. I love hearing this because this creates opportunity for me. It's a windfall, no-brainer. Why? One, many employers are going to pass on these excellent candidates just because of their gender, and that kind of idiocy becomes my windfall. Second, there are many studies that show that women are comparatively more productive. If you then consider how productive they are when they're working for you, and then allot the time off that they may or may not need, you're still either equal or ahead of the game, and you've got an excellent employee. Third, despite the best laid plans when it comes to running our offices, every one of us, from the bottle washer to the secretary to the rocket scientist, are all subject to urgent or unplanned or planned time off for things that happen in life. These leave gaps in the services and the operations that we run. And how do we deal with those gaps? Well, it's usually hair on fire adjustments in the operations. And yet, in the end, no one is harmed. Nobody dies. There's no tremendous loss of revenue. And if, in fact, many of these disruptions lead to new workflow solutions and improvements that help the office and how it runs. I'd say of the many, many women that have worked in my clinics and research and elsewhere, I'd say that the majority of them have been of childbearing age, I must say, and the majority of them have actually had 1 or 2 children while working for me. And I can't yet remember a significant hardship that I had to endure because they had a child. Yet I certainly do remember the wonder and value that that woman brought to the workplace that we shared. Lastly, most of my patients are women, and women are more apt to trust and be satisfied by other women in healthcare roles. Again, this is a no-brainer as to why I've hired women. So I'm proud that in April 2023, it is Women in Rheumatology Month. I've turned over the leadership on this and choosing the content and getting all the contributors to my gender better colleagues, Drs. Catherine Dow and Rachel Tate, mainly to avoid my mansplaining tendencies that would get in the way and to let them, the right gender, lead these important gender discussions and issues. So while in business, men are frequently in dominant positions of power and are often credited with changing or making history, why is it Harriet Beecher Stowe said women are the real architects of society? Is there some truth in that? Do you believe that? I believe that hiring the right personnel is a difficult decision. Should be based on qualification, skills, and candidate attributes that you need and that are essential to the job. And that is all regardless of gender. Yet, history shows I've chosen more women, mainly for their greater yield and consistency, dedication, and in team building. So I'd like to hear your comments on what you believe about hiring for the office or where you work, and is it related to gender in any way? That's my room thought.